nights before Christmas. Despite last-minute stress, few were delivering except Walmart Express.
Jpfan102504, and today I'm going to be doing a commentary on a video by the YouTuber Bale. He's a theory YouTuber who does like TV theories on things like SpongeBob and Avatar. This is the Alex Bale, Why Blue's Clues is a Fantasy Inside of Law and Order.
Hi there!
Refresh your space with a mid-century makeover at Ashley. From rich, solid woods to velvet-like.
Blue's Clues is an educational children's TV show about a man named Steve who lives in a magical world where he spends his day talking to inanimate objects, jumping through picture frames, and trying to find clues to help understand his magical blue dog.
This show is so nostalgic. I remember watching this as a kid. Also, I love how he did the whole Steve get up for the show. That's real nice.
Law & Order is a gritty, realistic police procedural / legal drama that involves New York City homicide detectives trying to solve murders and prosecute criminals. These two shows are very different. You could not find...
just to be clear, I have watched this already. This is just a commentary video. Expressing my thoughts on what I think about this theory. I'll share my thoughts at the end of the video.
Two shows more polar opposite than Blue's Clues and Law & Order. And yet, despite this, not only do I believe that these two shows exist in the same universe, but I'm also going to be proving that the entire Blue's Clues show is actually just a fantasy inside of the mind of a single Law & Order side character.
It's crazy how he just comes up with these theories, but when he presents them, there's so much evidence to them that they could be true. Obviously, this guy has much more free time on his hands than he lets on.
Yes, I am being serious. I know that sounds crazy, but just stick with me, because I'm pretty sure that I have discovered a 29-year-old secret that has never been talked about before today. Get ready, because this is the Blue's Clues Law & Order theory.
Put so much effort into his videos. Everyone just give him a shout out, give him his props, because he freaking worked so hard on this. Dream theory.
By far, the most common type of fan theory is the dream theory. The idea that everything happening in a story is actually all just inside of a character's head, whether they're stuck in a coma, or they're dreaming, or hallucinating, or they're actually dead. Pretty much every piece of media has...
Yeah. The dream theory. Yeah, you don't take much effort to come up with a dream theory for one of these kinds of shows.
Some kind of dream theory. And it's sort of the lazy, low-hanging fruit of fan theory.
Can people just, stop making it was all a dream theories? There's one of these for every show. Every single one. And they're so uncreative. You can literally say it about every single show and people won't deny it. It's sad. For starters, there's usually no evidence, besides maybe the show being not so grounded in reality. Guess what? It's a show. And secondly, it ruins the show and is always super depressing. Knowing that your favorite characters don't really get their happy ending, I'll excuse one of these if it has actual evidence. Can't think Can't think of any right now, but I'm sure it exists. People think this shit is groundbreaking, and like, it isn't. There is no thought process.
You can just apply it to literally anything, and usually there's never actually any evidence besides, "Whoa, this show is so crazy and unrealistic, that must mean it's a dream!" And surprisingly, the show that seems to have the most of these types of fan theories is Blue's Clues.
Man, I remember watching Blue's Clues as a kid. It was a real good show. A real feel-good show. I haven't watched the newer episodes, obviously. I haven't watched it in almost a decade and a half, maybe a decade and a half.
You got Steve is actually schizophrenic, Steve is actually in a mental asylum,
Steve, I like how he says that Steve is like a freaking psychopath killer or whatever. Like, who comes up with these? Like, I want to know who just. I can just imagine some guy just laying in his bed in the dark, just coming up with psychotic TV theories about children's TV shows. I mean, someone's gonna come up with them, I guess. I mean, Alex Bale's either a mad genius or just mad.
Steve is actually a drug addict. Steve is actually in prison. Steve is actually a murderer who killed his parents. Oh my god. Even I made a parody of these theories back in 2017. So yeah, it's a pretty...
Whoa. Look at OG Alex Bale with no
basic normal kid show. Steve, a
glad he grew the beard.
30-year-old schizophrenic who killed his parents pretends to be a kid. You know, that was before I dedicated my life to making fan theories about kid shows. And look, I understand.
I've seen all of his SpongeBob theories. Well, most of his SpongeBob theories. They're always so good. Like, he presents evidence in such a compelling way. I should do a series doing just commentaries on his SpongeBob theories, presenting my own ideas. You know, I'm only 2 minutes 45 seconds into this. I'm just gonna let it play and then express my thoughts at the end.
And the appeal of these types of theories. It's fun to take something innocent from your child.
Drew like a dark, fricked up version of the Hamburger Helper mascot. Haha. Just a glimpse into my dark reality. A full stare into my twisted perspective would make most simply go insane. LMAO. Not that scary. But I give props to how good your drawing skills are. Like, that's like Picasso level. Like, some freaking Vincent Van Gogh kind of like quality right there.
Childhood and give it a dark, edgy plot twist. That's kind of literally my job right now.
Oh, one of my favorite videos is the cabbage theory, where he like said that the cabbage merchant from Avatar is like a freaking cabbage bender. It can freaking see through the cabbage, like see people through the cabbage, spy on people through the cabbage, and his magic school bus theory. But I'll talk more about that later.
But why are there so many of these theories about specifically Blue's Clues? Well, I think it's because everything about this show has always felt fake.
No crap. It feels fake because it is fake. You know, it's fake. Kind of like the shade of that shirt you're wearing. That shade of green, it just feels fake.
Steve is the only real person in this world. He looks like a young adult, but he acts like a child. And he...
Yeah, I can see that. Some people are just like that.
lives alone in a house where he spends his day jumping into picture frames or talking to unseen voices or...
If you're hearing voices in your head, then maybe you should go, Get a therapist. Hearing voices ain't exactly normal. Unless it's like your inner voice, your inner monologue, you know what I mean? Like the little voice that you always have in your head when you're like thinking things. That I'm gonna stop talking. I'm gonna stop talking and just, watch the video.
Inanimate objects. It just kind of sounds like I'm describing someone who is experiencing some kind of false reality.
No key. This guy literally was an improv master. I mean, he was working with very limited, he made less is more into an art form, in my opinion.
Even the way Steve moves around is strange. He never actually leaves the room, he just kind of pretends to walk in place while this fantasy world moves around him.
Come on.
Obviously that was more of a filming limitation, but it still adds to this feeling of fakeness. But other than these surface level weird vibes the show gives off, there's never actually been any strong evidence to prove one of these theories.
Jeez Louise, there's so many of these theories. But only one theory will reign supreme, and it's Alex frickin' Bale.
And believe me, I and others have looked. It has been 28 years since this show first came out. You'd think if there was actually some kind of smoking gun here, we would have found it by now. But what if that's because we've all been looking in the wrong place? So, the other day, I stumbled upon an interesting piece of Blue's Clues.
He plays himself in Blue's Clues, but then he plays Kevin Jeffries in Law and Order. That's interesting.
Trivia. A year after Steve Burns filmed the Blue's Clues pilot,
Wow, look at how young he looks, honestly.
he had a small role in an episode
That photo right there says something. I'm not sure what it says, but it says something.
Of Law and Order. And I thought the idea of seeing Steve from Blue's Clues in a gritty, realistic cop
That would be funny. Ooh, Blue's Clues. Crime unit. They solve impossible crimes. Just him and Blue. And they're just like going around and solving like impossible crimes using, I don't know, detective skills or something. I don't know. That would be funny.
show was kind of funny, so I decided to track down the 1995 episode titled Cruel and Unusual. Just a heads up, this episode deals with some pretty serious
Content warning. Hollywood dramatizations of autism spectrum disorders, systemic and medical abuse of children with autism, fictional depictions of a mentally ill person being arrested, fictional depictions of self-harm, parentheses, hitting against a wall. Good job adding a disclaimer, content warning, proceed with caution. If this triggers someone, they need to know, like, hey, if this kind of material affects you, either don't watch or, know what you're going into past this point. Thank you, Alex Bale, for being so considerate and including a content warning. Thank you. Kudos.
subject matter, so please proceed with caution.
Stitch Fix is so convenient. You go through the style quiz. What is your fit? What's your style?
It's upon you.
In this episode, Steve Burns plays a kid with autism named Kevin Jeffries.
Good morning, how are you?
Great.
What time is it?
10:15.
No, it's 10:18.
We learn that Kevin has trouble communicating with others and often harms himself. So his parents sent him to live in a children's behavioral clinic.
Just what was the behavioral clinic doing for him?
When Kevin was 10, he started to hurt himself.
We didn't know what to do. We couldn't keep Kevin here. We had to send him away.
Well, that was your first mistake. Not trying something else. You only send a member of your family or your child to a facility like that as a very last resort. Obviously, they weren't very knowledgeable about autism or just neurodivergency in general, which it was common back in this time when this show takes place. I think it's like 1990 or something like that, 1995 or something.
We later find out that the doctors at this clinic were horribly mistreating him by giving him intense electroshock therapy and forcing him to wear a sensory deprivation helmet for
This is like this stuff happens in real life, but it's always so distressing, like upsetting to see. Like, if you're a decent human being, you'll be bothered by this no matter who you are, if you're autistic or not. Nobody should have to go through something like this. But okay, I'm not gonna talk anymore. We're only 5 minutes into this like 27-minute video. I'm just gonna watch it, discuss my thoughts on it afterwards.
days.
He kept Kathy in this helmet for 3 straight days. This helmet cut off the blood supply to our daughter's brain.
The episode starts with Kevin after he's escaped from the facility, but tragically he gets arrested and later succumbs.
One last thing, just I'm gonna save my thoughts for later after the video, but like the fact that Kevin constantly figures out how to like break out of the facility shows that he is intelligent. Like he knows how to do this. Like he knows how to escape, like formulate plans of action. Yeah.
To the injury sustained from his abuse and dies.
I don't know, Mike. I think the kid's dead.
And the rest of the episode follows the detectives investigating his death. So yeah, this is a very sad and serious episode, and it deals with some real systemic issues that are still a problem today. And like I was saying, this show is clearly very, very different than Blue's Clues. But what I find interesting about this is that for years, people have been trying to prove that Steve is actually in prison or a mental facility, and now we have this piece of media where we see Steve's actor in that exact position, and as far as I'm aware, no one's ever really talked about this. I mean, sure, Kevin's not schizophrenic, he has autism, but seeing as how he was being abused and put into sensory deprivation for days where he couldn't hear or see anything, you can kind of imagine that anyone in that position might try to escape to some kind of fantasy inside of their head. So yeah, I thought this was an interesting coincidence, but at the end of the day, that's kinda all it was. Like, obviously, just because the same actor shows up in 2 different shows,
I was gonna say something, but I totally just forgot what I was gonna say. Oh yeah. 2 different shows, same actor. Yeah, Alex is right. Just because there's same actor doesn't mean it's the same universe. Or does it?
doesn't mean they're actually connected. But then I took a closer look at this episode, and I started to notice more and more weird similarities between Kevin and Steve. At first, it just started with some little things. We are told by Kevin's parents that he was learning to draw.
Thanks to him, Kevin was learning to draw.
And in every episode of Blue's Clues, Steve draws in his handy-dandy notebook.
Our handy-dandy? Notebook. Let's draw a rectangle, and there.
That is some Picasso level drawing of cheese right there.
Cheese.
Okay, but so what? Lots of kids like to draw. But we are also told that when Kevin harmed himself, he was strapped to a chair.
We put them in a chair, and then we hold them there using soft cuffs.
And in every episode of Blue's Clues, Steve spends a lot of time in his thinking chair.
We're ready to sit in our
thinking chair.
Now that we're in our thinking chair, let's think.
And then, when Kevin escaped the facility, he kept asking people what time it was.
What time is it?
10:15.
What time?
How you doing today, huh?
What time?
Now, it is common for some people with autism to rely on specific schedules or routines, but what time it is also really important in Blue's Clues.
What time is it?
What time is it now?
Steve has a cleanup time,
We just had cleanup time.
a nap time.
It's Blue's nap time.
Now it's time for so long. There's a talking clock. And most of all, every day, Steve has mail time.
Mail time.
It's so freaking nostalgic, man. You just, like, comment with what your favorite show growing up was. It could be anything, honestly. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a quote-unquote kid show. It just has to be a show you enjoyed while growing up or your formative years. Heck, you still even like watching it, you know what I mean?
The mail's here.
So yeah, there's some weird similarities here, but nothing actually concrete. I didn't really start to take any of this seriously until I realized. After Kevin escaped, we are told that he went to a movie theater. And guess what he did in the theater?
Movie started at 10. He was out of here by 10 after 10. Got out of his seat, walked into the screen.
He walked into the screen. No, that just sounds like a regular Tuesday.
Kevin got out of his seat and tried to walk into the screen. Doesn't that sound exactly like Steve Blueska-doing into a picture?
Blueska-doo, we can too.
Got out of his seat, walked into the screen.
This kind of feels like more than a coincidence. So this is when I first started to consider, is it really possible that Kevin Jeffries from Law & Order is the real Steve, and Blue's Clues is all a fantasy he created to escape his abusive reality? Okay, I know you're not convinced yet, and to be honest...
Mr. Alex Bale, Mr. Bale, the Bale, you are very convincing, good sir. All your theories are bangers, even if they're bat crap insane. They have evidence, supporting evidence, and they're just entertaining to watch.
Honest, neither was I, but don't worry, we are just getting started. Kevin's behavioral clinic is in New York City, and the one-time characters actually leave the Blue's Clues fantasy world and go to the real world, they end up in New York.
Blue's Clues in New York City? This is epic!
Also, in the very first episode of Blue's Clues...
I'm just recording this on my phone, screen recording and audio recording. Both me and the audio of my phone. Yeah. So it's just my voice you're hearing. Well, I guess you could have already guessed that.
We can see a newspaper from the New York Times inside of Steve's house, strongly implying that's actually where he lives.
How long have I been recording this for? Oh, already 23 minutes. Okay, I'm just going to stop talking and just watch the video. I'm only 10 minutes into this, so I'll discuss my thoughts about the theory. You know, what I think of it. Do I think, obviously these two shows aren't connected, but this theory is also has good evidence so far, is entertaining, and hey, it's an interesting headcanon, that's for sure.
We can also see objects from Blue's Clues in Kevin's life. In Kevin's parents' house, we see a very large salt and pepper shaker, just like Mr. Salt and Mrs. Pepper.
Hi, Mr. Salt and Mrs. Pepper.
Hello, Steve.
Hello, Steve.
And in the clinic, we can see a red bucket, just like Steve's friend, Bale.
Hello, Bale.
Hi, Steve.
Also, when Steve left the show to go to college, he left on a blue bus.
Bye.
And when Kevin escaped the clinic, in his pocket he had a schedule for the Greyhound.
Here you go.
Amtrak schedule, Greyhound schedules.
Which is also a blue bus. Alright, those are some more interesting connections, but you're probably still not completely sold yet, right? Well, check this out. When Steve eventually left the show to go to college, he was replaced by his younger brother Joe.
Oh, hi. It's me, Steve's brother Joe.
And later, Joe got replaced by their cousin Josh.
Hi, it's me, Josh.
And not only does Kevin...
They don't look related. I'm just saying. I've never been good at finding this so-called, family resemblance. But yeah, obviously they don't look related because they're different actors. But you know what I mean?
Also have a younger brother, but at the clinic, there is a nurse named Joe.
What's your name? Joe Garvey. Joe Garvey, you're under arrest for assault.
And an occupational therapist named Josh.
Take a look at the amended complaint. An occupational therapist, Josh Bingham, was dropped.
I think that Kevin is taking aspects from his real life, like the objects or the names of the people working at the clinic, and applying them to his fantasy. Also, this one is less impressive, but the name Kevin is also the name of the Blue's Clues UK host.
Hello out there, it's me, Kevin.
Also, check this out. Kevin's behavioral clinic has the same initials as Blue's Clues. Huh?
Yeah, no, that ain't impressive.
That one's also not that impressive, I know. But wait. If this theory is true, and all of this is just inside of Kevin's head, then why does the main character of his fantasy keep changing?
Hi, come on in. Hi, come on in. Hi, come on in.
Well, at first, I thought maybe Joe and Josh could actually just be from two different kids who took Kevin's spot in the clinic after he died. But the clinic gets shut down at the end of the episode.
You made them close the clinic.
So they would all have to be from Kevin. But why? Well, we're told that Kevin has tried to escape from the clinic before.
Well, we called the police this morning as soon as the clinic told us that Kevin ran away. He's done this before.
So, what if every time a host leaves Blue's Clues, it's actually Kevin trying to escape the clinic, and when he's inevitably put back inside,
He's done this before.
his fantasy resets with a new Blue's Clues host.
Hi, come on in. Hi, come on in. Hi, come on in.
Okay, so there is a surprising amount of connections here. You can't deny that. But it still kind of feels like we're missing something. Like, I can see why Kevin would imagine a fun, colorful world to escape his abuse, but why is Kevin's fantasy so focused on playing a scavenger hunt game with a blue dog? As far as I can tell, there's nothing similar to that in this episode. Well, I think to answer this, we need to take a closer look at what Blue's Clues actually is.
We are live in
3, 2, 1. Oh, this is gonna be good.
At the beginning of the Law & Order episode, Kevin's doctor explained to the detectives why Kevin harmed himself.
It's pretty common with some autistic children. It's frustration because of their inability to communicate.
It's frustrations because of his inability to communicate. Now, autism is a spectrum, and it's a lot more complicated and nuanced than the way TV shows like this tend to portray it. But it is true that some people with autism have varying levels of difficulty communicating. And I think this becomes interesting when we take a look at what Blue's Clues actually is.
Well, what story should we tell?
Great idea. We'll play Blue's Clues to figure out what story Blue wants us to tell.
What is that haircut? Like, I know I've seen that haircut before, but I don't know what it's called. I think it's just a short haircut. I don't know.
It's a
If anyone could tell me, that would be helpful, I guess.
game where you try to understand Blue, a character who has an inability to communicate. This is literally the entire premise of the show. So I think that this is telling us that blue represents the side of Kevin who struggles to communicate with others. Okay, but where did the idea for a blue dog come from? Like I said, I couldn't find any references to dogs in this episode. The closest visual was this vaguely blue drawing in Kevin's room that I can't really make out, or this teddy bear that kind of had a similar pattern to blue, but nothing really concrete, which is weird because blue is such a major part of this fantasy. But then I realized it doesn't matter if we can't find a direct connection, because in Blue's Clues, Steve didn't actually adopt Blue. In a flashback episode of Blue's Clues, we learned that when Steve was younger, he read a book about a blue dog.
It's a book about a puppy.
Which caused Blue to magically come to life.
Is that book literally called About a Puppy? Real snappy title, real classy.
And I think this is also probably what happened with Kevin. We see that the Children's Behavioral Clinic is full of what we can reasonably assume are children's books. Maybe there's a book in here that also gave Kevin the idea for a blue dog, just like Steve. In fact, this idea of a children's book giving Kevin ideas for his fantasy is exactly what we see at the start of the Blue's Clues intro.
So, does this mean that there's a Blue's Clues book in the Law and Order storyline, but in the Blue's Clues universe, inside the Law and Order universe, there's a Blue's Clues book of a Blue's Clues book that exists in both the Law and Order universe and the universe of Blue's Clues. So, Blue's Clues. Okay, so it's Law and Order. With Blue's Clues exists within Law and Order, but Blue's Clues exists within Law and Order. Is that how that works? Like Blue's Clues within Law and Order. And then the Law and Order universe exists within a fictional universe which exists inside the real universe. So it's Blue's Clues inside of Blue's Clues, inside of Law & Order, which is a fictional universe that exists in the real universe, and the real universe theoretically exists inside of the multiverse, which might exist inside an omniverse? I don't know. The Blue's Clues cinematic universe. I've said universe way too much.
Hi, it's me, Steve.
Every single episode of Blue's Clues starts with a stack of children's books in the real world, before going inside of a book called Blue's Clues where the episode takes place. The show literally tells us every episode that Steve's world is fake and comes from a book. And I think this real world full of children's books is actually the Law & Order Behavioral Clinic. And if this is true, that also means that there's probably a book literally called Blue's Clues in the clinic that Kevin is basing his fantasy off of.
Like I said, Blue's Clues inside Law and Order inside of the real world.
So even if we never see a blue dog or even hear the name Steve in this Law & Order episode, Kevin still could have gotten all of those ideas from an existing Blue's Clues book in the clinic. Now, the only thing that doesn't really fit with this idea is mail time.
Hello, mailbox.
Hi, Steve. Have I got a letter for you?
Sure, maybe the talking purple mailbox was just something from the book, but there's no way Steve watching videos of kids in the real world would be something in a children's book.
Look, it's a letter from our friends.
Hi, Steve. This is where we play with our blocks. This goes that way.
So, what are these videos? Well, the behavioral clinic is full of other children.
You want to see what a good day is for some of these kids?
So, I think these videos are Kevin's perception of the other kids. There is just an undeniable amount of connections and similarities between this episode and this show. It just really feels like Blue's Clues is all a fantasy inside of Kevin Jeffries' head. But at this point, you're probably wondering, could any of this actually be intentional? Like, if this theory is true, does that mean that the entire plot of Blue's Clues was actually secretly based on this one random episode of Law and Order?
I don't really think so. But it would be a fun tangent to go off on.
I'll admit, that seems unlikely, especially since this episode came out a year after the Blue's Clues pilot was filmed. I think it's a lot more likely that if this was intentional, then it was probably just the Law and Order creators deciding to secretly connect these two shows on their own. Maybe just because they thought it would be funny, I don't know. Or maybe it's some weird mixture of both, because even years after this episode came out, Blue's Clues does still seem to weirdly line up with it. I honestly don't know. And to be fair, this could all still just be a bunch of weird coincidences and that's it. But regardless of the creator's intent, it still works, you know? And it makes talking about Blue's Clues a lot more interesting. And at the end of the day, I think that's kind of the point of all of these edgy Blue's Clues fan theories. And this was originally where I planned on ending this video. But there was still one lingering question that was bothering me. If Blue's Clues really is just inside of Kevin Jeffries' head, then what about when Kevin died at the beginning of the episode? I mean, I guess we can just say that the entire Blue's Clues timeline takes place before Kevin's death, and if the show ever gets canceled, then we can just say that that is when Kevin died and the fantasy ended. But what if I told you we've already seen Kevin's death inside of Blue's Clues? So, I recently watched the new Blue's Clues movie from 2022 called Blue's Big City Adventure. And not only did I find even more similarities between this movie and the show, but I believe that this movie is showing us the day that Kevin died and the true end of the Blue's Clues timeline. So, this movie is about Josh, the newest host of Blue's Clues, going on a big adventure to audition for a Broadway musical in New York City.
Blue, we are definitely not in storybook world anymore.
It's kind of what you'd expect out of a modern-day Blue's Clues movie. He goes on a journey to the real world and gets lost, there's lots of wacky hijinks, but in the end, he finds his way and gets the part.
We want you to be the star of our Broadway show.
Yes, of course. Yes.
But if you watch this movie with this theory in mind, so many things take on a whole new meaning. The first thing that immediately caught me off guard was the opening song.
It's a brand new day.
This song is about starting the day, and Josh keeps saying, "Good morning."
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Blue.
And literally, the first thing we hear Kevin Jeffries say is, "Good morning."
So is Donovan.
Good morning, how are you?
Despite it clearly being night. We also hear this line in Josh's song.
This life is just like a beautiful dream.
This life is just like a beautiful dream. Interesting. And while Josh sings, the other characters keep telling him to wake up.
Wake up! Wake up!
It's a brand new day.
Right away, this movie feels different, like it's trying to draw attention to the fact that this world is just Kevin's fantasy and it's time for him to leave it. Josh leaves his fantasy world to go to the audition in New York, just like how Kevin escapes the clinic at the start of the episode. And just like Kevin, Josh immediately seems very disoriented by the outside world. Until, of course, his fantasy starts to take over to protect him from reality. But what's interesting about this movie is that for the very first time ever, we get these little glimpses of Blue's Clues from other people's perspectives.
Don't you think so, Madam Mustard?
That face says it all. Like, what?
Lovely to meet you.
Whoa! Mr. Salt! Mrs. Pepper! Am I glad to see you? Ah, oh my God!
Like I said, this movie feels different. We learn that Josh's audition is at 3 o'clock, and the whole movie is just him trying to find the audition before time runs out.
It's almost time for my audition. Oh my gosh. We don't have much time, Blue.
Could this be why Kevin kept asking people what time it was?
What time is it? What time? What time?
Josh also doesn't know where his audition is. All he knows is that it's in a theater somewhere.
Excuse me. Do you know the address to the theater? Which theater? I don't know which theater.
Maybe this is why Kevin went to a movie theater after he escaped, because he thought it was his Broadway audition. Now, in the Law & Order episode, shortly after leaving the theater, Kevin gets arrested and then tragically dies in police custody. But that's not what happens in this movie. Josh goes to the theater and gets the part.
We want you to be the star of our Broadway show.
Yes, of course. Yes.
But instead of him leaving and dying like Kevin, we immediately cut to him performing the musical in a big climactic finale.
My dream is a reality.
So, if this movie really is Kevin's final escape, then what if this is what Kevin experiences as he dies?
And I can feel my world changing.
A massive final magical song where he's surrounded by all of the friends from his fantasy, the only people who ever really understood him. Even the old hosts show up for this final send-off for Kevin.
And thank you for making this a day and an adventure that I will never forget.
I'll never forget how you helped me find all those clues. Thanks again for all your help.
No, really. Now it's over. So long.
And that is sadly where Kevin Jeffries' story ends. Now, I know this final movie theory maybe doesn't have as much evidence as the rest of my theory, but regardless, I like thinking that maybe Kevin found some peace in his final moments. And yeah, I know that this movie came out 27 years after the Law & Order episode, so it's probably a stretch to say that they're still connected. Wait, is that fucking B.D. Wong?
I'm the director of Rainbow Puppy's Broadway musical.
B.D. Wong from Law & Order SVU is the fucking director of Josh's musical?
I'm not entirely comfortable labeling the suspect a serial killer. We want you to be the star of our Broadway show.
Holy shit!
We just figured out Blue's Clues. We just figured out Blue's Clues. We just figured out Blue's Clues.
Because this is my job.
It's your job to find out these crazy frickin' theories and bring them to light.
This is actually my job. Alright, that is my theory. Thank you so much for watching. Hope I didn't ruin Blue's Clues for you. Hey, thanks for 1 million subscribers. That's really...
Congratulations. 1 million subscribers, man. Good job. Really good job. So, my thoughts on the Alex Bale Blue's Clues Law and Order theory. I think it has its merits. I definitely think it has good entertainment value. He brought up some very interesting similarities and evidence that support his theory. And overall, I just think it's one of his good theories, you know? Like, he explained it in a way that is understandable. And, yeah, I really enjoyed it. So, this is Jpfan102504 signing out. And I hope you liked my 44-minute commentary on this video. Have a good day or night.